I mentioned a lot of crazy stuff going on in the NBA, and we have to start out in the Mile High City. Just last week or 2 weeks ago, we were talking about Memphis thinking nothing crazier would happen than that coaching change. And then we get, I guess we're going to call him Shams Bomb still. I don't know. Michael Malone out in Denver with 3 games left in the regular season, tied for the latest head coach firing in NBA history. So it's basically unprecedented. And in the corresponding move, Calvin Booth was let go. They let him know, hey, we're not going to extend your contract. You're out after this year too. So that's happening while the Nuggets are battling for playoff positioning. So two-parter for you to get into this. First off, what do you make of this situation and the timing of it? And on the second half of it, does that take away any of your confidence that this Nuggets team can accomplish anything of reason in this postseason? Because now it's in flux. David Adelman's the head coach now, or the interim head coach. And there seems to be a lot of unrest in the front office that probably impacts the product on the floor.
Yeah, when the Taylor Jenkins firing happened, that was obviously a pretty wow, shock factor moment, but not I don't know, you could kind of see it. The Grizzlies had kind of gotten stagnant, and even though they've had great records under him every year besides last year, you kind of shape up in your mind why that might happen. Where with Michael Malone, I did not see this coming at all. And I know that
championship 2 years ago.
2 years ago. And I know that, now that the reports are trickling out, it seems like the writing was on the wall a little bit. And then everything started to make more sense a few minutes after the first Shams notification. Once, they announced they also were firing the general manager. So clearly just clearing house there. But it was still a wow factor of this guy has had 8 consecutive winning seasons. There's no coach in the NBA that's had more wins than Michael Malone over the last 5 years. This is a team that obviously was struggling on the defensive end. They were struggling a little bit down the stretch here, but you would never think that the best possible answer for their chances of success in the postseason would be firing the head coach, even if you're clearing house with the general manager. And I just pulled up the quote that Michael Malone had after the Grizzlies fired Taylor Jenkins. And he said, for Taylor to get fired at this late stage in the season and for them to be where they are is really shocking and odd. I just can't wrap my head around it. And then he got fired 11 days later. So
that's wild.
Yeah, it's just, I really do think, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, I really, really do think that the Luka Doncic trade made anything possible in the NBA. These front offices and key decision makers, from the higher ups and the brass and the owners that are putting all these money into these programs, I really think that they're okay, this is pretty crazy that we're going to do this, but it's not crazier than trading Luka to the Lakers. And I don't know that for sure. Obviously, it's just speculation, but it just feels like teams are operating with a little bit more of I don't really give a what. We're just going to do this, and people are going to react the way that they are, but they're never going to react as rashly as they have with this Luka stuff. So yeah, why not? Let's go for it. So yeah, let's slap an interim tag on a head coach and go into the playoffs and see what we can do. But I still expect Denver to make some noise in the playoffs. Jokic had that cold quote from last night about the beast is most dangerous when it's most vulnerable. And I'm excited to see what they can do in the postseason. But, obviously just a shocking move.
Yeah, it's funny because that is the two thoughts that are always going to go through my mind now when we get some type of notifications dang, this is crazy. I can't believe it. But then it's well, I kind of can believe it because, 2 months ago, whatever that day that was, February 1st, February 2nd, that notification that we saw that had to be clarified with a yes, this is real. Notice that Shams has never had to say that ever again. Yes, this is real. So NBA fans, we are now in that mentality of man, this probably could happen. I wasn't going to expect it. But like you said, they did a pretty good job, I guess, of keeping it in-house. All the unrest that was happening between Calvin Booth and Michael Malone and things that were kind of happening, disagreements that were happening. But like you said, when you start to look back at things and see Michael Malone calling out the team on not watching film and them going kind of back and forth with not paying Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and the guys who have walked since they won that championship less than 2 years ago. I said 2 years ago, but it was June 2023. We're having this conversation 22 months later. So it hasn't even been two years. So I do think it makes it interesting. There's some vulnerability, like you talked about, like Jokic said in that cold quote. They do have the best player in the world. Anytime you have the best player in the world, you have a chance, especially in a 7-game series. But I'm curious to see, and the injury part is another part of it too, with Jamal Murray and like how serious is that? I know we talked about that before with this Nuggets team. So I am very curious to see how they respond, how they rally. We're seeing the Grizzlies start to figure some things out. We're seeing them play subtly different and be a little more loose. We're seeing Zach Edey, big shout out to him, rebound like a madman, averaging, I think, like 17 boards through his first 4 games in April and just getting more playing time. So are there going to be subtle differences in what the Nuggets are doing? Is this an audition for Adelman to keep the job full time, or is he just a lame duck and the Nuggets have a bigger plan in mind? And I know the other part of it is going to be because this is the only head coach that Jokic has ever had in his career. So there's going to be corresponding conversations down the line if the Nuggets don't go far in the playoffs, if somehow they slide back and play in the play-in tournament and things end really easy for them. It would be pretty crazy because it will be the second year in a row that a team 2 years removed from a championship has an early exit. The Warriors last year couldn't even make the playoffs 2 years after a championship. And now the Nuggets are on the fence of maybe doing the same thing. Last night, as we record this on Thursday, they had a big win in Sacramento, but still, it's not all set in stone for them because they haven't helped themselves with that skid before the firing. So I'm really curious to see about that. And I know we can speculate more when the offseason comes, but kind of like you said, Jokic doesn't have much leverage. He's under contract for a long time, but I'm very much expecting the Nuggets to make some type of big move. If it's Murray, if it's MPJ, if it's Aaron Gordon, I don't know what it's going to be, but feels like all cards are on the table for them whenever they are eliminated from the playoffs.
I think that's the biggest part, right? It's the end of the way that this season ends is going to have such a significant impact on where they move the direction of this franchise going forward. Like you said, they have the best player in the world, Nikola Jokic. So they're obviously in win now mode and they're going to stay in win now mode. But if they were to come up short in the first round, second round, don't make it to the Western Conference Finals again, can't get to the NBA Finals, now all of a sudden, they're in a position where they're going to hire a new GM and decision maker. They're going to hire a new head coach or like you said, potentially promote Adelman. But regardless, it's going to be a different look Nuggets team next year, as long as I like pretty much I would say as long as they don't win the championship, we're going to see a different Nuggets team on the floor. And I mean, there were different at different points of this season. I mean, there were the Zach LaVine rumors that he might go to Denver around the trade deadline. And then MPJ started playing better and they decided they didn't want to trade him. Aaron Gordon is a player who has significantly raised his trade value, in my opinion, over his time in Denver. And I think a lot of teams would, throw a decent amount of assets, future assets, to get a player like that they believe could take them over the edge to, be more of a championship contender right now. So, they have guys that have trade value. It's just the weird part about the Nuggets is they don't have a lot of like young guys in future assets with trade value where they could, package some of these guys together, keep the core that they have right now and add a piece, around the group that they have right now. So it does feel like one of those situations where if they are going to make a move, it's going to have to be a pretty big swing and it's going to be a completely different lineup around Jokic next season. But again, this is all speculation. Who knows? Maybe they use it as motivation and go on a run and go to the Western Conference Finals. And then they start to think, all right, we can keep this core together. We just have to tweak a few things around the outsides. But, I do think that there's going to be a lot of change headed to Denver this offseason. And I'm curious to see what those types of moves are.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely going to be having my eyes really close on how they perform in the postseason, play-in tournament, playoffs, whatever it is. And that's going to impact the future and what's going to happen there. As always, thanks to everybody who tunes in to the pod, wherever you get your podcast. Please make sure to subscribe on all podcast platforms, as well as follow us on YouTube and Instagram at NBA Sound System Canada. For Kyle Irving, my name is Gil McGregor. Thanks for tuning in to us this week. We will catch you back on here, same time, same place next week.